Hello, this is part two in a discussion of the crystalline structure and fluid dynamics in astrology. And in this part two, we're going to take a closer look at Vedic astrology. And at the end of this video, I have a link to part one. But you can watch this video independently of part one if you want to, because I'm going to focus on Vedic astrology. Now, as I did mention in that first video on the crystalline structure and fluid dynamics in astrology, one of the outstanding things in Vedic astrology is the sophisticated, intricate understanding of what I'm calling the crystalline structure in astrology, which means anything that we're interpreting that has clearly defined sections to it, such as the zodiac signs. In addition to the zodiac signs, we have in Vedic astrology the nakshatras, a system of 27 divisions. It's another zodiac. So zodiacs do not have to be just 12 signs. In Vedic astrology, there's a kind of a zodiac that has 27 signs. And this sounds very strange to some Western astrologers, like, how can there be 27 signs? We know there are 12 signs. Well, why do we know there are 12 signs? What makes us so sure about it? In Vedic astrology, they have another zodiac that's 27 signs. And then the Western astrologers say, why are we making it so complicated? Well, maybe this crystalline structure, these sections of the sky, are more complex, intricate, and sophisticated than we have assumed. And then there are all the vargas, or sometimes called divisional charts, with all of that intricacy and all the relationships between things. And then, on top of all of that intricate detail that's going on in the charts, there are other things used in Vedic astrology, such as the planetary combinations, as they're known commonly as yogas, which means combinations of planetary patterns. So in the West, we have ideas like the Mark Jones 7 chart types. Well, then you go to Vedic astrology, and there are hundreds of chart types, depending on how the planets are laid out. Are they in the cardinal houses, which are called the Kendra houses in Vedic astrology? What is the relationship between these? And you get all kinds of yogas, layouts of charts, hundreds of them, not just seven. And then within each of these yogas, there are many variations, things that modify or can even prevent the full flowering of that yoga from developing. And then they have their predictive system of dasas, which again tend to be discrete time periods. So there's an emphasis in Vedic astrology on things being discrete and well defined, or what I've called in that first video crystalline. And then during a certain dasa, the capability of certain planets and signs comes out. So it's just an amazingly sophisticated and intricate understanding of the crystalline structures in astrology, which, and as I pointed out in that first video, one thing that's amazing about this is that scientists have recently proposed that there's a complex jewel-like structure at the heart of reality, just as the Vedic astrologers have proposed that. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Vedic astrology in any detail, it's amazing how much information there is. There are ways to determine planetary strength, many different systems. Some are very numerically intensive, others are simpler. There are ways to evaluate which planets affect what areas of life, what are called the karakas. There you what's the word I'm looking for? You twist or adjust the chart, and you could put the moon as the ascendant, called the Chandralagna. It's really amazing the sophistication and complexity of what we're looking at. And my feeling when I look at this complexity in Vedic astrology is it's very much like looking at a cathedral. So, I live in the United States. We have some beautiful cathedrals here, but, we love to go to Europe, and you walk in those cathedrals. I look at them and I think to myself, this is not possible. Humans cannot create this cathedral. It's just not possible. It's so enormous, so intricate, so beautiful, so powerful. You just look up in awe. It's hard to imagine the creativity and the capability of the human spirit is amazing. And Vedic astrology is the same way to me. It's just awe-inspiring in the same way that these cathedrals are. And what's interesting is that in Vedic astrology, the understanding of this exquisitely complex jewel-like structure at the heart of reality, that's how I visualize it. I've never heard a Vedic astrologer describe it that way. That's my interpretation or way of seeing Vedic astrology. And to me, it's so beautifully developed that you can see many of the details of a person's life because you've seen the stage, what I called in the first part of this, the first video on the uh, structure, the what's the word I'm looking for? The structures in life and the fluid dynamics, the crystalline structure, that's the word I'm trying to remember. In that first video, I emphasize that the crystalline structure shows you the stage, the setting, but it doesn't show you the actual action in the chart that you get from the fluid dynamics. And that may have sounded like, oh my God, Vedic astrology is so empty, it's so lacking, all it's showing us is the stage. But the stage is understood in such detail. It's as if you're saying, okay, here's the stage. We have this kind of floor. We have this kind of lighting. We have these kind of chairs. We have these. The setting is so intricately described. It's as if you said, okay, there's a king's throne here in the center. Well, if there's a king's throne, there must be a king. So the details of the context of your life are so precise, so staggeringly well defined and described that you can see things like career choices, even though the fluid dynamics typically are not included. But I am saying that there's still something missing in Vedic astrology, and that can be upsetting to some people who are very sure that their particular style of astrology is extraordinarily comprehensive and detailed. What I'm suggesting, what I believe, my point of view, is that even though Vedic astrology and many other forms of astrology are these exquisite cathedrals, they're staggering, they're unbelievable, they are something that I or you could never create single-handedly, it's still just the beginning. It's still just the starting point for where we're headed. There's much, much more. So, and furthermore, if all of this is true that I just said, that in Vedic astrology we can analyze in such great detail and see all these things, then why is it that nobody to date has conducted research that clearly and unambiguously shows that astrology works? So many people consider astrology to be nonsense, a superstition. We make all these claims and all this specific information, especially from Vedic astrology and some other forms of astrology that say very specific things. If all that's true, why is it not validated? Well, part of the answer is that we have not had information systems available until our lifetimes to investigate carefully. The whole idea of very careful, objective research, the availability of lots of data that can be gathered in an unbiased way and analyzed statistically, and all the kinds of new research methods we have, these were not available. So that's one reason why astrology has not been validated. And another reason why astrology has not been validated is that I think that every school of astrology has something important to contribute. Well, if every school has something important to contribute and every school is different, that implies that therefore every school of astrology is missing something important. So as I just alluded to, what I'm saying, my point of view, is that there is no system of astrology that is so comprehensive, thorough, and extraordinarily accurate that it can work with tremendous consistency. Now, these are very controversial statements. If you say you have any belief in astrology at all, some people think you're crazy. If you think that one system of astrology is better than another, everything's very, very controversial. No matter what I say, somebody's going to get angry and upset. So I'll just put out there what I think. What I think is that these systems of astrology are impressive. Vedic astrology, in particular, is like a beautiful cathedral. It's also a cathedral with huge amounts of information missing, and that's the part that may upset people. But I think we have to acknowledge the beauty, the grandeur of what we've inherited, and we need to keep moving forward. So these fluid dynamics, as I call them, where we see how aspects gradually strengthen and weaken, and the complexity of those vibrations, as we use in vibrational astrology, is something that I think is going to hugely improve Vedic astrology. That's where I stand, and again, no matter what I say, I think people are going to get upset because all these things are so controversial. But one thing that I did in the first video that might have been a little bit uh, unclear is the emphasis on what a fantastic contribution Vedic astrology has made. It's staggering. It's a cathedral that we just stand in awe of. So, to summarize some points I'm making here, each school of astrology has made great contributions to astrology. I'm not saying this to be politically correct. I'm not saying this to pacify people. I'm not saying this to be a goody-goody New Age guy. I'm saying it because that's what I have observed. It may take centuries to determine what parts of these systems work as they are described and which do not. I think we have to be humble enough to say that some of our astrological ideas work, they do what we say they do, and some do not. We have a huge, complex, tangled ball of information that's staggering in its complexity and scope, and gradually we sort these things out. So, although we stand on the shoulders of giants and we give our deepest respect to those who brought us to where we are, we must also continue to question, doubt, and innovate, and move astrology forward and leave astrology in better shape than the way that we received it. That's my view. So I just wanted to make that clear. I did not include all of this information in that first video, and I wanted to just add a little more depth to what I said in the first video based on the responses that I've gotten so far. And to elaborate on this just a little bit more, yes, this is my last slide. We can place too much emphasis on labels. We can compartmentalize Vedic as if it was a discrete, separate area of astrology, and then there's classical Western and modern Western and vibrational astrology. They're not actually completely distinct. The labels are okay because they give us a general sense of what we're talking about. There's actually so much variation within each school of astrology, and so much information went back and forth. At the recent large conference, UAC, in 2018 in Chicago this year, Kenneth Miller, for example, gave a lecture on how information passed back and forth from the areas of the Middle East and Greece to India. So things are not so separate, and we get too carried away with these labels. So if I say that Vedic astrology is missing some huge thing, well, every area of astrology is missing huge things. And why do we even use these labels of Vedic astrology, which, by the way, most people are now saying we should use the term Indian astrology. But anyway, that's a subtle aside. My point here is that we can get too carried away with the labels. They are helpful for identifying general trends, but I think if we become too enamored of these labels and too identified with them, we miss the complexity of life and the developments that are going on. We really just want to move astrology forward and not worry so much about the labels that we apply to things. And even when we use a word like Indian astrology or classical astrology, they're just labels for certain movements and tendencies that tended to stand out. What we really need to do, here's the final conclusion that I feel personally very strongly about, just to let you know where I stand on that. My last two sentences here on this slide. We can move astrology forward by investigating and developing both the crystalline structure and the fluid dynamics of astrology, period. Full stop. That's it. This is my point of view. Let's move forward. I've gotten some feedback within 12 hours. I went on Facebook and I got all these messages. I was like, wow, what the heck's going on here? I never got such a strong response to a video. And many people thanking me profusely for making this clear because they were so confused. And some modern Western astrologers saying that I sort of dissed their system and said how much better Vedic is. And some people who use a lot of Vedic astrologers saying I disrespected their system and said, we can't really do anything in Vedic. You're saying we can't do anything and all we want to do is get moksha through these rigid structures and we missed everything. Well, maybe I implied that and didn't mean to. I think the healthier, more constructive way to look at this is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand looking at these cathedrals built by thousands or millions of people, and we inherit this. And what do we do with it? We need to move it forward. So let's not get too carried away with the labels, and let's just move it forward. Again, let me say it one more time. I believe the crystalline structure is complex. I believe the fluid dynamics are complex. And whatever label you want to put on it, doesn't matter. Let's move astrology forward. Okay, thank you very much, my friends. God bless. Namaste.